This story began with an extremely bad day for the main character, who was fired from his job, and when he returned home, the landlady kicked him out because he had not paid his bills for more than 3 months. Thus, the young man ended up on the street, and he spent his last money on alcohol. Sitting on the balcony of an abandoned building, the guy took out his mobile phone and looked at a photo of his girlfriend. While drinking beer, he looked at her and thought that at least she didn't leave him on such a bad day. However, a few minutes later the young lady wrote him a message saying that they needed to break up. Hysterical laughter ran through Zhang. He couldn't believe that such bad luck could happen. After which he finished his alcoholic drink, crumpled the can and nervously threw it to the side. Bai realized that he had nothing to lose and spread his arms like wings. After a couple of seconds, he was floating in the sky and noticed a certain sign behind him. Suddenly he remembered a dream in which he found himself in an ancient civilization, but never had time to experience it, because he always woke up. The main character naively believed that he was imagining all this, but suddenly he fell to the ground. Zhang realized that this was not a dream at all, because the pain was very real. Getting to his feet, Bai began to look around and discovered that he was in a place from his dream. At that moment, the earth shook, the sky turned purple, showering meteorites on the ground. In the distance, the young master saw a certain pedestal on which there was a statue in the form of a human hand. Taking a closer look, he saw a shining ring on his thumb, and an incomprehensible magic suddenly enveloped the stone hand. Zhang tore the ring off his finger and began to look at it closely, realizing that it was worth a lot of money. The young man thought that this dream foreshadowed him about various trips in the near future, after which he became sad, because he believed that this was just a dream and that he would wake up soon. Suddenly a strong wind arose, literally knocking him off his feet. Suddenly, Bai discovered that he was still sitting on the balcony of an abandoned building. At that same second, he fell from the railing onto the balcony and realized that the strange dream was over and he woke up. The guy instantly grabbed his phone to see how much time had passed. At that moment he noticed that the ring from his dream was still on his finger, which could not have happened, or he continued to be in a dream and it all seemed to him again. In connection with this, the main character began to pinch himself in order to wake up, but it was no longer a dream. Suddenly, a spherical creature appeared near him and congratulated him on acquiring the imperial ring. The young master was shocked by what was happening, and without holding back his emotions, he asked who he was. The round stranger declared that he was in fact an evil spirit. After some time of silence, Zhang repeated his question again, because he did not understand what was happening. Stepping back, the young man grabbed the handrail, which at that moment shone with some kind of magic. The perplexed guy noticed that this most magical glow comes from the ring. Bai began to panic and said that it was all because of this ring. The spirit looked thoughtfully at its owner. The pet said that the main ability of this accessory is to retreat. The stunned master tried in vain to understand what he was talking about and continued to examine the ring. Then he asked his new friend to tell him more about this ring. The magical comrade said that with his help Zhang would be able to return a thing or person in time, thereby returning back. Bai finally realized what a treasure he had fallen into his hands and began to calm down. But the young man was interested in one more point, because the spirit said that his main feature was retreat. And just as he wanted to ask him about it, suddenly there was the sound of sharp brakes of a car. The main character instantly turned around at the sound and began to look out from the balcony. Below was a young lady who hesitantly stepped out of her expensive car. She shouted into the distance to the driving car so that the initiator of the accident would not leave the scene. However, this did not stop him. Then the girl began to desperately call for help. Suddenly Zhang recognized the girl as the CEO of the company where he had worked until recently, and where he was fired with scandals. Bai again thought about how strange this day is. The tear-stained lady continued to scream for help, because her mother was in the car. The bloodied woman was unconscious. The guy still decided to help her, because he would still find a job, and human life is priceless. Running up to the car, he offered to take her mother to the nearest hospital. The girl naturally agreed and a moment later they rushed to the hospital. The woman, in turn, never came to her senses. Her wounds were extremely severe. There was also a metal part from the car sticking out of her back. The situation was complicated. This is what the spirit spoke about. He stated that medical assistance was powerless in this case, because her body was mortally damaged. Then the young man urged him to use the ability of his ring, the pet noticed that the effect on the owner would be serious. But the brave and generous Zhang strongly recommended that he activate the ring, because human life is at stake. The perplexed girl could not understand who he was talking to. Finally, the spherical friend activated the magic ring and everything around began to shine with a golden light. As a result, a few seconds later he collapsed to the ground along with the woman. However, at the same time, all the wounds on her body suddenly healed, and it was as if there was no blood. The metal part from the back simply fell out, and the wound also gradually healed. After some time, the guy woke up in an unknown place and abruptly jumped out of bed. Naturally, he was tormented by the question of where he was, since from now on it was not clear whether he was in reality or in a dream. Zhang then remembered that he had lost consciousness after activating the ring skill, after which he saw the ring on his finger and calmed down, but at the same time he had lingerie in his hand. Bai fussed and didn't know where to hide the bra. He immediately blushed with shame and began to remember everything in detail. But it was at that moment that a young stranger came into his room, whose mother he helped save. The main character began to make extremely ridiculous excuses for her personal belongings, saying that he did not want to touch them. The girl looked at him in surprise and advised him to get out of bed if he felt well. Soon they sat down to have breakfast. Zhang understood that he was at her house, but he did not know how he ended up here. Suddenly, the young miss thanked him for helping her mother, because he had indeed saved her life. The young man smiled and politely replied that he was always happy to help people in need. But the girl abruptly changed her tone and asked how exactly he managed to save his mother, and why he was in that place at such a late time. Hinting in every possible way that he did it for the sake of money, Bai asked what she was talking about. The young lady rather pretentiously called herself the director of the Dongxing company, whose name was Tang Huanli. The guy replied that until yesterday he was also an employee of this organization. Extremely surprised, Wan asked why until yesterday. Zhang lowered his head and said sadly that he was fired from his job yesterday. Li assumed that the young man deliberately set this all up in order to return to their company. In this connection, she offered him to become assistant to the general director of Dongxin. The main character initially remained silent and could not believe that she was really so ignorant. However, after standing up and sharply asking what she was talking about, Ten replied that this was his goal, and he achieved his goal. The angry Bai said that he was not interested in this position as a sop. Leaving home, he finally gave the young lady advice so that she should not look down on all people. But as soon as he walked out the door, he immediately met her mother, whom he had saved from certain death yesterday. The woman, in turn, was extremely glad to see him in health and smiled sweetly. As she passed by, she thanked the young master for saving her life yesterday. But Zhang simply walked on without paying attention to her. Li's mother asked what was wrong with him. Huang replied that he was not in the mood. Bai said at this moment that if she has money, it does not mean that she is a great person. Even the spirit was surprised and asked why the owner did not accept alms, because in their world money really decides everything. After which he strongly recommended that the young man eat, since he had spent too much energy saving the woman. But the guy continued to ignore the advice of his newly made comrade and took out his phone, where he looked longingly at a photograph of his ex-girlfriend and said that he had wasted 4 years on her. The spherical friend continued to say that the gentleman needed to have a snack, otherwise he might fall into a coma. However, he was interested in something completely different, why 4 years later she suddenly decided to leave. Subsequently, the young master went to her home, where the front door unexpectedly found itself open. Looking behind her, he saw how the boss who fired him said that he got rid of this loser and now they will be together. Naturally, Zhang could not stand such betrayal and broke into the apartment like a madman, after which he immediately began beating the man, but his ex-girlfriend stood up for him, stating that Bai had no right to beat him and should not have come here. This was a real shock for the guy. He asked why she was standing up for him. The young lady said that during their relationship he did not give her anything, adding that after they broke up, he also dared to show up at her home. The enraged young man asked if he was really such a nonentity in her eyes. She fell silent for a couple of seconds, but then stated that this is exactly the kind of person she considers him to be. Meanwhile, the beaten boss rose to his feet, and the distraught Zhang again attacked him with his fists. And again he began to beat the lustful and extremely arrogant former boss, who said that he had better stop this circus, and then he would spare him. This only angered Bai even more and he declared that he would beat him to death. But at this time the girl intervened and with a sharp movement pushed the young man away. Thus, the young master hit his head against the wall and felt weak in his body. At this moment, the girl helped her newly made man get up. But the old man was furious and even pushed her aside. The girl asked him not to be angry. Zhang, in turn, leaned against the wall and felt his consciousness slowly floating. The evil spirit noticed that the owner was about to lose consciousness, because his body had already reached its limit. What happened a moment later, the young man literally collapsed to the ground unconscious. The old man immediately jumped up to the teenager's body and began kicking him, urging him to get up. Then he looked to the other end of the room, where there was a baseball bat, and ordered the girl to bring it to him. But the young lady said that this could be too dangerous for the guy's health. Raising his tone, the enraged De Fu began to insult her and repeated his demand. The girl, in turn, gave in to him and obediently brought a wooden bat. The boss nervously snatched it from the girl's hands and already swung it to kill Zhang. However, at that moment the general director of the company entered the apartment. The old man immediately hid the bat behind his back and announced that he had decided to learn to play baseball. Wan responded by saying that she needed this young man, and she was taking him with her. After a certain time, the main character woke up with a bandaged head, which hurt terribly. The wild pain did not give him the opportunity to understand what had happened. A little later, Bai looked around and discovered that he was again in Li's apartment. At that moment, Tan came into his room and asked if he was okay. The guy asked her, by chance, if she saved him yesterday. Wan answered positively, busily adding that she doesn't like to owe people, even feelings. The young master said that now they are even, and he will immediately leave her house. But Li said that some people don't want him to leave and it's really better for him to stay. Meanwhile, Miss Tang arrived in the room and invited Zhang to have dinner with them. They had no choice but to agree, and after a couple of minutes they were all sitting together at the table. Dissatisfied, Wan noticed that her mother rarely cooks and he should act as if he likes everything. The food prepared by the aunt, in turn, did not instill confidence in the young master. She really had a terrible smell and looked like tar, but the guy played along and praised her for her culinary skills. He himself understood perfectly well that it was impossible to eat, but he hadn't eaten anything since yesterday. Therefore, he came to the conclusion that it was better to be poisoned than to die of hunger and began to greedily grab his aunt's cooking, after which he turned green, but continued to eat through force. Li understood that he was overacting, and when Zhang refreshed himself, Tang suddenly announced that he needed to get back to work, adding that some of her subordinates do not have very good character, but what matters most is their ability. Bai said displeasedly that such people may be experts in their field, but they harm others. Then Li invited him to take the position of department head, instead of De Fu. The main character did not expect such a turn and at first did not even know what to answer. The next day they arrived at Dong Xing's company. The guy looked at the building for a long time and doubted his decision. However, Tang had a different opinion and hurried the young master to go inside, where he naturally met with his former boss, who did not miss the opportunity to laugh at him. Declaring that he still decided to return after being fired, Zhang barely restrained himself from another beating, but in the end he said with a smile that he really decided to return. Throughout the working day, Yes watched by, as if he was looking for an opportunity to annoy him. He wasn't even stopped by the fact that the guy was supported by the director. He still wanted to find a way to get rid of the young man. After which he called his subordinate over and reminded him of what he was obliged to do in the evening. The employee repeated that he needed to pay people to solve this problem. Fu added that the rule must be followed, and outside the company they do not know each other. Meanwhile, the working day was coming to an end and Zhang was about to finish working. At that moment, the boss approached him and asked him to follow him to look at the latest batch of goods. Because in order to achieve success, you always need to start small. Bai, in turn, agreed, but was well aware that this could be a trap. Entering the warehouse, De said that the young man needed to check all the goods for defects. Fu was already anticipating the teenager's failure, naively believing that he would not pull out his tricks again. As soon as the main character headed towards the porcelain vases, the assistant chief followed him. Then he pushed the young master in the back, so Zhang literally flew into an expensive product, which crumbled into small pieces and could not be restored. Enraged, Yes began to rage and faintly express his dissatisfaction, saying that the company will lose a lot of money because of his personal animosity towards him. The cunning old man also added that the guy planned all this in advance, but understood that it was a trap. Fu then ordered his subordinate to close the warehouse, and he, in turn, would report everything to the general director. A moment later, the door closed, and the young man began to think about how he could get out of this situation. After all, this is handmade Xuanzhen porcelain, and can cost several $1,000,000. Realizing that the boss had planned everything well, the guy desperately grabbed his head. Suddenly he remembered his miraculous ring and sighed with relief. Then he hurried to use his unique ability and turn back time. At this time, Miss Li arrived with a denunciation. Yes, the girl was shocked by this news. Fu looked sad and said that this was the largest party in their company. While Wan was recovering from such terrible information, the old man continued to play his innocent role. The boss said that the guy didn't do it on purpose, even though he had motives to take revenge on him. Tan mentally began to curse the main character for his clumsiness and asked where Zhang was. Fu replied that he was still sitting in the warehouse. Li ordered that she be taken there immediately. Approaching the front door, the young lady asked the employee where Bai was. The guy sadly replied that he was in the warehouse and still had not left there. The old man, pleased with himself, ordered his subordinate to open the door to talk to the young man. Tan, in turn, was more than upset while the wily old fox looked forward to his victory. After all, he understood that such a loss would be a disaster for a small, miserable company. As soon as the employee opened the door to the warehouse, the bosses were at a loss for words and began to insult Zhang. However, a moment later they saw a shocking picture. All the porcelain products were intact. Bai said that for some reason De threw a piece of porcelain at the goods, and if not for his reaction, the vases would have been broken. After which I asked the general director what she was doing here. Surprised, Li said that Fu reported about the spoiled products. The guy noticed that such misinformers should be fired. Angry, Huang turned to the perplexed old man and asked what was happening. The boss said he personally saw the broken vases. Then he said ominously that he would find out how this teenager could do this. The young master broke into a malicious smile, realizing that nothing would work out for him, because he used a magic ring. At this time, De began to check all the vases and was amazed, because he really saw them broken, and now there is not a scratch on them. The main character, gloating, asked Fu if he had finished the examination. The old man was furious. He didn't notice how he forgot to put one of the vases on the floor and accidentally pushed the others. Thus, they simply crashed like a domino. It was a shock for everyone. The boss himself suddenly realized that he had fallen into his own trap, and this was the end for him. The embittered headmistress Huang did not stand on ceremony with him and expressed her indignation. He even started to stutter and couldn't say anything clearly. He didn't know how to explain what had happened. Zhang took the opportunity to mock him and said that these vases were worth several million. Fu couldn't think of anything better than to blame it all on Bai, saying that he was the one who pushed him. The guy continued to smile and provoke the angry old man in every possible way. Just as the enraged De tried to hit the young master, he was suddenly interrupted by Li. Tan said threateningly that he had defamed a colleague and caused a multi-million-dollar loss to the company, in connection with which he fired him. Fu was shocked by this decision of the general director. The girl said that he needed to pay the damage to the corporation within a week, or the court would force him to do it. Depressed, De went to the exit and looked with a hateful gaze at the satisfied young man, saying that he would soon regret it. The main character once again broke into a smile and replied that he would look forward to this day. Meanwhile, Headmistress Li was completely upset and didn't know what to do. Seeing her in this state, Zhang hugged her in a friendly manner and tried to calm her down. After a short period of time, Bai asked if she was okay. A tearful Huang sadly said that her company was over, because this batch of goods was completely destroyed, adding that the guy deliberately used this situation to get revenge on De Fu. Then she suddenly pushed the young man away from her and said that she didn't want to see him now. The teenager said that he would help her drink compensation from the old man, or he would beat him again. But Tan pointed out that if they try to return the product, they will have to pay 10 times the original amount to return it. Moreover, the product transfer date was tomorrow. Zhang understood that there was no time left. Li continued to complain and sadly say that it cost her incredible effort and it was all in vain. The main character called upon his evil spirit, who was categorically against such a decision. But Bai ordered him to immediately activate the ring. The pet tried in every possible way to dissuade him, because he would suffer greatly. Suddenly the guy said that he would help her return the vases to their original state. Lee wondered if he could really do this, but how? However, she had no choice, and besides, in some miraculous way he cured her mother. Perhaps there is something magical and special behind the young man that they cannot comprehend. She had no choice but to trust Zhang. The girl went out the door and waited for the result, while Bai began once again to restore the vases. Pieces of porcelain flew into the air and gradually began to stick together. The room began to glow with a golden magical light. After a few minutes, dozens of goods returned to their previous state. While the young master had no strength left at all, the blood vessels in his eyes burst and filled with blood. Suddenly the guy felt wild weakness throughout his body. His skin literally began to dry out. As a result, he collapsed to the ground, but did not lose consciousness and endured until the last. After which, the exhausted Zhang turned to his spherical friend and encouraged him to continue the recovery process. And after a couple of minutes, Bai began to cough up blood, but remained conscious. The porcelain particles slowly came together. The mutilated teenager realized that he did not have long to endure. Juan, in turn, became nervous and began to listen to see if he had finished restoring the vases. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore and went into the warehouse, where all the products were absolutely unharmed. The exhausted main character sat on the floor and said that it was all over. Tan instantly ran up to her savior and inquired about his health. Zhang replied that he was very ill and had a severe headache. Li saw blood on his face, and she advised us to take him to the hospital, because in this condition it was impossible to continue working. But Bai asked her to just give him some time to rest to regain his strength. For some time, the girl held the exhausted young master with her hands. Then she still helped him get up, and they headed to her car, Li insisting that he go to the hospital. However, even in this condition, the guy refused to be hospitalized, saying that he was simply bleeding from his nose and was dizzy. At that moment he hugged the girl, which she, in turn, did not like very much. But she understood that she would have to be patient a little, because the teenager had actually already helped her twice. Tan mentally urged herself to calm down and not focus on this. Suddenly, a patrol car drove up to them, and police officers got out. Juan did not understand what was happening and what law enforcement wanted from them. The inspector looked at the exhausted guy and asked if his name was Zhang. Extremely indignant, Li asked them what was the matter and why they needed him so much. The insolent policeman said that he was not talking to her, but to the young man, and repeated the question again. The teenager took a hesitant step forward and replied that he was indeed Bai. After which, without any explanation, a law enforcement officer ordered him to be taken away. The girl took the arm of the guy who didn't understand anything and led him to the car. Tan said they do not have the right to arrest a civilian who needs medical attention. But the police officer showed an arrest warrant for the guy and said that he was suspected of conspiring with 3 escapees from prison. Perplexed, Huang asked Zhang what was going on and what they were talking about. Bai replied that he himself did not understand anything and had no idea what kind of prisoners he was talking about. Li, in turn, insisted on hospitalizing the teenager, because health comes first. But the police refused her request because, by law, public safety would call a doctor for him. And he is suspected of a serious crime. The assistant inspector assured Tan that everything would be fine with the young man. Huang was shocked by this verdict from law enforcement officials. Meanwhile, Zhang was already riding in the back seat of the police car, and suddenly he became very ill. The police officer thought that this little girl could become a problem for her. At this moment, Bai said that he felt very bad and had no more strength. The girl asked what he wanted. The young master replied that he needed to rest a little and lay down on the legs of the young representative of the law. The girl, in turn, allowed him to lie down and said that if he really turned out to be a criminal, he would have a hard time. Her assistant also began to exaggerate and stated that once they get to the site, he better be an obedient boy. At this time, Huang still decided to follow them. She could not leave the young man in trouble. After the main character was brought to the department, Zhang demanded more food. The spirit reported that his body had already been restored. The investigator noticed that he eats too much and this is not a restaurant to hold a banquet here. But Bai said that if he was hungry, he would not be able to concentrate and answer their questions. This only infuriated the policeman, who hastened to put the young man in his place and urged him not to be so arrogant. His partner hastened to calm him down and asked him to go get a few more servings of noodles, so that during this time it cools down and releases steam. since they need a cool head. However, the guy deliberately added fuel to the fire and asked him to buy him beef noodles. The police officer was furious, but still controlled himself and went to get food. Then the investigator asked if they could talk normally. Zhang asked her a counter question about what was going on. The girl asked Bai who ordered him to help the prisoners escape from prison. The young master said that he did not understand what she was talking about and had never dealt with any bandits. The policewoman sighed heavily and walked to the front door, then turned and asked the young man to follow her. The perplexed master asked where exactly they were going. The young lady remained silent. Then she led him to a cell, from which 3 criminals escaped through a hole in the wall. The main character asked what kind of equipment they gave to the prisoners. The representative of the law said that they did not give them any equipment, and they received help from outside. Moreover, he is the only suspect, and it was he who helped the criminals escape the prison. However, Zhang stood his ground and said that he had no acquaintances in such places. The investigator ordered the duty officer to bring one young man. This person turned out to be none other than Defu's assistant. The beaten guy said that Bai had arranged everything and apologized to him. The young master realized that this was another trick from the restless old man. At this moment, the spherical friend informed his owner that they had problems. The main character was surprised and asked what he was talking about and what kind of problems they were. The evil spirit sadly replied that Chi-Yu Breath's sworn enemies had tracked them down. The guy didn't understand what he was talking about and asked what kind of Chi-Yu this was. The pet said he would explain everything later. But now there is one monster right in front of him. The young man looked at them and tried to figure out which of them was a demon. At that moment, the investigator hurried to handcuff him and reminded him of his rights. Zhang urged her not to rush to conclusions and said that this matter was not as simple as she thought. The girl decided to give the teenager a chance to enlighten her in this situation. The young master slowly walked up to the huge hole in the concrete wall and carefully examined it. He still couldn't understand what kind of equipment it was that was used to make such a smooth hole. Unexpectedly, the evil spirit declared that Chi-Yu's breath was written in this armhole. After which Bai asked the police if they could find out what kind of device they used to make such a hole in the wall. The perplexed investigator asked why he was so concerned about this question, adding that they can certainly figure it out, but the matter is completely different. Suddenly the young man interrupted her and approached the beaten accomplice of the old man. Yes. The teenager asked how long they had known each other and what equipment he used to break through the wall. The guy replied that he used explosives and a chainsaw, and they also thought out this whole plan 3 days ago. Law enforcement officials doubted the veracity of his words, since such a hole could not be made with explosives and a chainsaw. Zhang stated that this was not true because the opening was obviously made with a high-temperature tool, and 3 days ago, the owner of the apartment knocked on his door because he wanted to collect 3 months' rent. And if they don't believe it, they can check this fact. The girl understood everything and asked the previously detained person why he framed Bai. Old man Fu's assistant smiled and said that a dead person doesn't need to know so much. His face changed at the moment. The police screamed like crazy that he was actually a ghost. A huge monster with burning eyes walked towards the frightened investigator. The main character was also taken aback and asked the spirit what was happening, because he turned out to be not a person at all. A magical friend urged him to run away immediately. Meanwhile the monster got to the girl, which he grabbed and for some reason began to tear her clothes with his sharp claws. The policewoman begged for help, but her colleagues fled in different directions. Zhang was about to jump through the hole to escape when he suddenly stopped. The spirit did not like his idea of helping the girl, saying that it had nothing to do with him. Moreover, the owner is initially obliged to take care of his safety. At that moment, the monster called on the owner of the Imperial Ring to give him the ring in exchange for the life of the investigator. Bai began to say that the girl had nothing to do with it, because in fact, he was the one he needed. Meanwhile, a worried Wan stood outside the windows of the police station, believing that the guy will not have any problems, and he will definitely get out of this incomprehensible story. A couple of minutes later, an unknown black car drove up to the building. Tan's acquaintance got out of the car. A young guy in a light suit headed to the police station. Seeing Lee, he greeted her and suggested that she go somewhere to unwind. However, the young lady refused him and said that she had no special desire. After which the young man smiled and entered the building. One could not understand why he came here. The master asked his spirit if he was sure that Chi-Yu was here. The pet answered positively. Meanwhile, the monster continued to beat the poor police girl, and demand from Zhang that he immediately give his imperial ring to him. Bai instantly called on his spherical friend to activate a return to the monster. Fire magic literally poured out on the ferocious demon, but nothing happened. The monster screamed loudly, and the golden light turned into fiery dust that fell to the ground. Then he grabbed the young master and declared that the ring had not awakened and would not do anything to Chiyu. The demon intended to kill the main character and said that he would soon die and become the new owner of the ring. However, it was at that moment that the unknown master shot at the brutal monster. Having thereby torn off his hand, Chi became enraged and began to look around. There was a guy standing at the door with a gun. He smiled and said that today was a good day for him. The demon asked who he was and what he had to do with what was happening. The young stranger silently pulled the trigger once again on the maddened monster. Thus, you released the exhausted Zhang, who fell to the ground. Bai sincerely rejoiced at his salvation, since he already believed that he was finished. At this time, the monster again asked him the question of who he really was and why he was helping this guy. But the unknown person remained silent and continued to shoot at him. The healed Chi noticed that ordinary bullets would not harm him. Dodging the demon's attacks, the stranger urged the guy to cut his fingers and smear the monster's body. The main character did not immediately understand that he had told him this, and therefore asked again. The young master naturally stated that he asked him to do this because there was no one else in the room. The spirit noticed that the master's blood belonged to the Xian Yuan lineage, and for Chiyu this was extremely harmful. Zhang began to hastily look around to find something sharp and discovered a stone. Meanwhile, the guy continued to dodge the attacks of the angry monster, and after some time, the monster finally drove him into a corner. The master realized that he had nowhere to run. Chi began to gloat, realizing that at the moment the advantage was on his side. But as soon as he tried to attack him, Bai arrived in time to help. He struck with his bloody hand at Yu's very heart, and the demon's body burst into flames. The evil spirit noticed that getting into the heart is a sure way to quickly destroy the monster. Covered in ash, Chiyu tried to turn towards the young master to hit him. However, he only managed to make one movement before he had already turned into a hull. A certain magical essence fell out of the monster. It was the size of a coin, and it had a characteristic symbol. The particle rolled along the ground towards an unknown master. The main character asked if it was all finally over and the demon was destroyed. The satisfied guy picked up Chiyu's particle and smiled and declared that it was all over. Zhang asked him where the monster had gone and what kind of magical essence had fallen out of it. The young man was extremely surprised that the evil spirit did not explain this subject to Bai. The teenager was also surprised that the stranger could see his magical friend. Then I asked him another question about who he really was and what he was doing here. However, the young master ignored his question and walked away smilingly in an unknown direction. Once on the street, the unknown person was satisfied with the result of the work done. He called on his spirit to appear. As he had prepared a special gift for him, a spherical friend immediately appeared. The guy gave him the particle and ordered him to absorb it in order to gain his awakened form. The spirit happily began to absorb the essence of the demon and said that he was sleeping when the owner met the monster. The young man busily adjusted his glasses and replied that it was extremely difficult for him to cope with Chiyu. At this time, Zhang examined the wounded bodies of the police. The pets stated that they were unconscious, but breathing was present. Bai sighed with relief and asked him who it was and what was going on. A moment later, armed police officers ran into the building and pointed guns at the foreman. The perplexed guy raised his bloody hands up and said that he could explain everything to them. However, in this situation it was very difficult to believe in his innocence, especially when they saw their colleagues and investigator Xiao Nan injured. One of the law enforcement officials noticed that there was blood on the guy's hands. The other instantly rushed towards the main character to immediately detain him. The enraged policeman began nervously asking what he had done and why there was blood on his hands. After a certain time, Nan finally came to her senses and began to look around. She was surprised that she was still alive and asked her colleagues why they were there. Representatives of the law were sincerely happy about her speedy recovery, after which they all went together to the interrogation room, where they decided to find out what really happened. One of the colleagues asked how Xiao was feeling and whether she would be able to attend the interrogation in this state. Nan stated that she saw a huge monster, about 3 meters high, and its body was black, adding that if it weren't for this brave young man, she would no longer be alive. Zhang modestly replied that if she wanted to thank him, they could have a cup of tea sometime. The investigator urged Bai to watch his words, as this is a police station and he should be more serious. The guy began to provoke him in every possible way and replied that in their department the dogs barked very loudly. The policeman did not tolerate such an impudent attitude towards himself and already wanted to hit the teenager. However, at that moment Xiao unexpectedly stood up for him. The girl urged him to calm down. The colleague was shocked by her unpredictable behavior and left the interrogation room. Nan began to thank her savior, saying that today had been a very difficult day for all of them. Zhang decided to clarify whether he was free and could go home. Xiao answered positively and was about to see him off. But her colleague did not allow her to do this, who said that he would personally see the guy off. However, as soon as they opened the door, Nan suddenly called out to Bai. The young man thought that again she had some questions and asked what was the matter. The girl smiled sweetly and invited him to add her to the chat to improve their communication. Naturally, the main character agreed, but the policeman did not like this idea. In connection with this, he literally kicked the young master out of the station with kicks in the ass. Zhang also reciprocated and wished him good night, as evidenced by his 2 middle fingers. Turning around, he unexpectedly saw Wan, who was still waiting for him. The girl smiled sweetly at him. Li said the public safety officers wouldn't let her in, so she had to wait there. Bai asked what she would do if he was kept in the police station for more than 2 weeks. Tan answered without hesitation that she would have been waiting for him all this time until he came out. The main character was shocked by this answer and could not believe that she said this. He felt extremely awkward and did not know what to answer her. Silence hung in the air. Wan also constantly replayed in her head the words she had said that she would wait for him, and she couldn't understand why she even said that. They rode in the car in silence. Taking this opportunity, Zhang decided to find out from the spirit what kind of magical essence it was that fell out of the monster. The pet replied that this is the Chi-Yu race, and the breath of Chi means the smell that comes from the skin of the monster. Bai indignantly asked why he had never talked about this before. The faithful friend replied that he had never asked about this, nor about the origin of the imperial ring. The guy, in turn, asked him to tell him everything that was necessary right now. The ghost said that the ring did not fall into his hands by chance, since his bloodline is Xian Yuan, and the spirits are sealed. At this moment, Huang notified the young master that they had arrived. The young man told his friend that they would talk about it later, because he needed to go with Li. Upon exiting the vehicle, they discovered an unauthorized vehicle on the property. Tan also noticed that their lights were not on, but their mother should be at home, and as soon as they crossed the threshold of the house, they were met by unknown robbers. Wan naturally got scared and began to ask who they were and what they were doing on her private property. Another bandit grabbed the main character and then tied his hands behind his back. Zhang summoned his spirit, but he stated that today the ring's ability had been used to its limit. Thus, Bai could not do anything or help in this situation. The criminals tied everyone up and made them sit on the floor in the living room, where Li's mother was. The main character threateningly asked who they were and why they did all this, because they had never met before. One of them said since he was going to die soon anyway, they could show him something. After which he took out a photograph of Yes and said that he had spent a lot of money to organize this sudden visit. Tang, in turn, was shocked that Fu would actually do such a thing. Then she stated that she would pay them several times more than this man to let them go. One of the mercenaries, breaking into a smile, replied that she apparently considered herself special. Suddenly he grabbed Wan and said that she would die anyway, so they should play a little. The other closed the door to the room behind them and called on his brother to hurry up. Zhang immediately became enraged and ordered them not to do anything stupid, so as not to regret it later. Without thinking twice, the bandit grabbed the knife and pointed it at the young master, urging him to calm down so as not to die prematurely, because the game is not over yet. Meanwhile, Tan in another room asked the criminal to come to his senses and not make a mistake. The scumbag said that her screams were useless and no one could help her. His partner continued to threaten Bai with a knife and at the same time tried to call his third accomplice. The main character could not calmly listen to Li's screams from the bedroom. He was filled with anger, while the robber still could not reach his partner. The guy, whose mobile phone was turned off, became noticeably nervous. His confused look indicated that everything was not going as they had originally planned. Suddenly it dawned on Zhang that these were the same 3 prisoners who had escaped from prison. The robber decided to hurry up his friend and shouted to him that he needed to hurry. Bai began to persuade the bandit and began to ask about their friend. The guy said that he had been released from prison a couple of days ago. The young master realized that this was indeed a Chiyu race, which made the task much more difficult. Wan's screams continued to be heard from the bedroom, the young man becoming furious while the robber mocked the situation. The guy deliberately started talking about his money on the card, which he did not have time to spend and did not think that his life would end today. Then he turned to the bandit and offered to tell him the password for his card. The criminal urged him not to pull his tricks or make sudden movements. Then he put a knife to Zhang's throat and demanded his password and card. Bai asked him to come closer so that he could whisper in his ear so that others might hear. As soon as the smug scumbag approached him and offered his ear, the guy began to act. The young master literally bit off his ear. The bandit screamed in pain like crazy. The main character did not hesitate and instantly flew into the room with another big guy. He pushed the huge, tattooed criminal away, who collapsed to the floor. After which he asked if Wan was okay. The girl didn't even have time to answer when something terrible happened. The robber stabbed Zhang in the back and thereby pierced him. After that, he twisted it mockingly and pulled out his bloody knife. Then he suddenly stepped aside. Blood instantly gushed out and sprinkled the floor. With the last of his strength, Bai urged Tang to immediately run away while he apprehended the criminal. The enraged scumbag, in turn, again rushed to attack the young master. The bound young man could not resist him and received another stab in the heart. Blood flowed down his bound hand straight onto the magic ring. It seemed that this was the end. The main character knelt down and, choking on blood, looked pitifully at Li. At that moment, the ring on his finger suddenly awakened and shone with a bright light. Magical golden streams of energy enveloped Zhang's wounded body, and the evil spirit said that the ring had awakened. Literally a moment later, Bai found himself in an unknown location, where many gears were spinning. He asked what this place was. The pet replied that it was his consciousness, and because of the heart of justice and Xian Yuan's blood, the imperial ring awakened. The guy asked him again to find out more about this very awakening. A faithful friend said that the power of each ring is a product of compaction, and awakening restores the ring's ability. The young man urged him to tell him what this ability of awakening is, since the situation is now critical. Streams of some magic flowed from the eyes of the evil spirit, which launched the mechanism. A screen appeared in front of the master, where he saw his death in Huang's room. The ghost noticed that this is the awakening of the imperial ring, and he can control time. After which, various screens with many recent events appeared in front of him. Among them were moments of fights with monsters. The pet called on the owner to make a choice. He can choose any event and be transported back to that time, but he can only return within 6 hours. Adding that the gentleman can use this skill only once a week. The spirit repeated to Zhang that by activating this ability, he would be able to use it in 7 days. In addition, activating time control is a prerequisite. Bai understood that he had to save Tang. After some time, the main character finally made his choice and chose one of the events provided to him. The spherical friend wished good luck to his owner and said that they would see each other in a week. A couple of seconds later the guy found himself in the car with Wan, who noticed that they were already at the entrance to their home. The young man politely asked her to stop the car. The girl, in turn, was surprised. But she still stopped the car and asked what happened. Zhang smiled and looked at her. Then he said that she was fine. Li didn't understand why he was acting so strangely. Bai said that there were bandits in the house and they had captured her mother, so going there together was extremely dangerous. The perplexed girl asked how he knew about this. The guy replied that she should just trust him. After which the young master urged her to give up the keys to the house and hide in the car. Wan obediently handed him the keys and got into the car, saying that he should return anyway. She herself doubted his words, but my mother was definitely at home, and for some reason the light was not on. It was suspicious. Meanwhile, Zhang quietly walked to the front door and grabbed the handle. Suddenly it broke off. Bai assumed that after awakening the ring, his physical strength increased many times over, which made the task much easier, because it would be easier to neutralize the bandits. The main character, in turn, overly confidently headed inside the house. Li could only guess what he was really up to and how it would all end. The guy started knocking on the closed door and demanding that they let him in, saying that he knew about criminals in the house. A second later, the door actually opened, which is what Tan said. At that moment, a crazed bandit with a knife attacked him, noting that the teenager was extremely stupid for knowing about the ambush and taking the risk anyway. The blade of the knife was right in front of Zhang's eye, but the young master managed to dodge the blow. Moreover, he could see the trajectory of the knife, because after waking up, all his senses were also heightened. Dodging the attack once again, the young man grabbed the big guy and thereby knocked the knife out of his hand. Then he grabbed his neck with his hands and ordered him not to make sudden movements so as not to break it. The robber was in shock. After all, the boy was really very strong and he could not resist. At this time Bai found Nan's contact. The teenager recorded a voice message for her saying that he had captured 2 escaped prisoners and called for people to be brought. Then he ordered the frightened criminal to call his accomplice. The big man immediately called out to his friend. He understood perfectly well that this man could not do everything alone. Suddenly, a light suddenly came on in the house, literally blinding the young man for a couple of seconds. Lao Er demanded that the boy let his friend go and then he would not kill the woman. It was Huang's mother. Surprisingly, the situation was more like a movie, which is exactly what Zhang thought. Bai ordered the woman to be released, or they would regret being born into this world at all. Er made the same demand to let his elder brother go, otherwise they would all die here. Thus, no one was going to fulfill each other's conditions. The situation seemed stalemate. The young master thought about how much the ring's ability would be useful to him right now. At that moment, Tan approached them and threateningly asked what was happening here. The main character tried to calm her down and said that he would definitely save her mother. Li was about to call the police. With shaking hands, the girl took out her phone. But Lao didn't like it and said that if the girl did this, her mother would die right here. One asked what they were doing here and how much money they needed to let them go. The bandits looked at each other and thought about this proposal from the girl. The elder replied that they needed 10 million and they would take this brave man hostage. Tang was scared and did not know what to do. Zhang, in turn, agreed to their conditions. After which Bai released the criminal. It seemed that the problem would soon be resolved. The robber immediately dealt an extremely painful blow to the young master. Li stood up for him, stating that she would now prepare 10 million for them. The elder said that if there was no money within an hour, they would all die. The girl understood that they did not have such a sum, which meant they needed to beg Lao Tutsu. At that moment, police patrol cars suddenly appeared on the horizon. The stunned criminals looked at each other and asked who called the police. There was silence in response, but in fact Zhang managed to send a message to Xiao. And a couple of minutes later, law enforcement officers cordoned off the entire building and called on the bandits to surrender. At this time, the eldest big man suddenly hit Huang, who flew to the side, after which he grabbed Bai and ordered the younger one to run away immediately, since they did not want to return to prison. However, his brother had a completely different plan. His eyes suddenly filled with darkness. The perplexed guy asked his accomplice what happened to him, and only the main character realized that this was Chi Yu's race. The zombie-like Lao instantly rushed towards the young man. Having thus released Ms. Tan, the teenager understood that he needed to act. He instantly disentangled himself from the criminal's grip and immediately attacked him. Then he hurried to run to the side, so Er did not have time to grab him. After which he took his aunt in his arms and hurried to the exit to ensure her safety. He urged her to run away immediately, assuring her that everything would end very soon. However, the woman said that he should leave and not worry about her. At that moment, a brutal Lao flew at Zhang, turning into a monster. This time the young master did not run away and decided to give battle to the monster. Bai began to deliver his crushing blows to the demon's body and finally defeated him. A minute later, the police, led by Xiao Nan, burst into the house and ordered everyone to remain in their places. The angry Qi was able to figure it out in time and suddenly grabbed Huang, after which the monster jumped out of the window with her. The young man did not expect such an outcome. Xiao ordered to open fire on the demon, but the main character ordered them not to do this, because they could hit Li. Nan began to assure that she was a very accurate shooter and needed to catch up with him, but Zhang grabbed her gun and pulled her aside, declaring that he would personally go after it. Thus, Qi Yu was still free, and also took Tang hostage. Bai hurried to climb out the window and called Xiao to take care of everything else, after which he chased the monster, which he ordered to stop immediately. But naturally the monster didn't even think about doing this and accelerated, but the persistent guy was catching up with him. Then the demon stopped abruptly and released an unknown purple cloud. The young master asked what it was, although he understood that he could not do anything good. Lao, in turn, burst into a smile and declared that this was a gift for him. Juan continued to be unconscious, which also made the task more difficult. Then air, like an insect, suddenly climbed onto a tall building. Zhang knew that he could not catch up with him. At that moment he realized that this cloud of smoke was actually a sleeping gas. However, at the last moment, when the demon climbed onto a high-rise building, someone shot at him. Thus, the monster released Li from his hands, who rushed straight to the ground. Naturally, Bai managed to catch her. As it turned out, an unknown master once again helped him. His spirit noticed that the young man's imperial ring had awakened. The guy said angrily that from that moment on he began to hate him, because the feeling that your opponent has overtaken you and is even overtaking you is quite unpleasant. Meanwhile, the main character tried to wake up his beloved Juan, but the girl did not come to her senses. He held her in his arms and tried to understand what was wrong with her. Zhang put his hand to her nose and felt her breath, which means she was alive and simply lost consciousness from shock. Bei was extremely curious who helped him this time. He looked at the lifeless body of the monster. Then he turned his gaze upward, where the unknown master was looking at him. Also next to him he saw a spherical friend, only not yellow, but blue. The teenager realized that he also had a ring to which the same spirit was attached. The stranger again started to leave without any explanation, but the ghost was against it, since if one of the owners of the ring dies, he will no longer be so lucky. However, he still insisted on his own, and a moment later his silhouette disappeared from the roof of the house. Meanwhile, the police arrived to the young man, and a worried Nan asked if he was okay. "And where is that very monster?" The guy pointed to the bloody body. Xiao checked his pulse and came to the final conclusion that the demon was dead. Zhang noticed that there was a bullet hole in his body, and someone shot him. While the girl was giving orders to her subordinates, a certain dark entity flew out of Chiyu's body and headed towards her. Nan asked Bai if Li needed hospitalization. The guy replied that she just fainted and there was nothing serious. Suddenly he felt dizzy. The young man assumed that the poison had not yet worn off. The girl, in turn, smiled at the young master and said that it was finally all over. The main character hurried to take Tang back and asked if Xiao needed him anymore. The young lady answered positively. Having asked him not to disclose what happened so as not to cause people to panic, the teenager assured that he would not tell anyone about it. After which the guy left. Nan looked after him. Suddenly a dark entity appeared behind her again. Who was happy about the appearance of the first imperial ring? Naturally neither the young man nor Xiao saw her. Meanwhile, Zhang hurried to take the sleeping beauty home so that she could rest a little. He gently laid her on the bed. Juan couldn't understand why she was so hot. The girl said in a languid voice that she was very hot and everything was burning inside. Bai could not understand what was happening to her and why she was overcome by fever. Perhaps the sleeping gas was not ordinary. Li was literally spinning from side to side, not understanding what was wrong with her. Suddenly, she began to reach out to the guy and grab his face. She could only wonder what happened to her. Suddenly he remembered the words of the monster, who said that he had prepared a gift for him. This demon was really cunning and apparently was planning something suspicious. At a certain moment, the young lady again pulled his hand. The young man resisted in every possible way. Several days passed. Zhang couldn't wait for tomorrow for the ring spirit to awaken. Bai hoped that Juan would not remember what happened and would not develop this topic. Otherwise, it will be extremely awkward for him to look into her eyes, much less talk about it. Suddenly the guy heard the voice of his aunt, who unexpectedly called him. The young master came down to her and asked where she was going. The woman said that she was leaving the country and was entrusting her daughter to him. Perhaps she would never return. The young man did not understand anything and asked Li what happened. Tan stated that their father ordered them not to go to work after what happened. However, Huang refused to leave. Zhang noted that her mother apparently did not support her in this decision. The girl said that after everything that happened, she could not take her side and listen to her father. At that moment, news was broadcast on TV about the arrest of DeFu, who was involved in the theft of company funds and murders. Li noted that evil always and quite rightly receives retribution. The main character asked her if she really wasn't going to return. Tan replied that this company meant her whole life. But they set a condition that she should not return to the post of director, and from now on another person will dominate there. Zhang was shocked by this news. Huang hurried him to get ready so that they could make it to the meeting. After a while, they stood in front of the Dongxin Corporation building. For some reason, it seemed to Bai that he was superfluous at this celebration of life in connection with the new management. Li was worried about this meeting and asked if the guy was ready. The teenager said that they had no other choice. Meanwhile, the meeting had already begun and the young people, as it turned out, were late. What the new headmistress could not help but notice, the girl said that Wan was deliberately disrupting the meeting to annoy her. Zhang was extremely surprised when he saw another pretty lady at the head of the company. She approached him and said that she approved of Tang's taste, because the young man was really good-looking. Li hastened to report that this young man was simply renting a room in her house. Then she called on Fan to continue her meeting, and asked Bai to follow her. You couldn't understand what was so special about this boy, because before, Huang always stuck to her principles, and she never took anyone as an assistant, especially a male one. Tang seemed annoyed. The young master asked who she was. The girl said that the business she talked about back in those years when she was in college brought in a lot of money. Besides, she is a childhood friend, and she always loved to play some strange games with people, but she was still sent here. The main character understood perfectly well that others simply have the right to this, and therefore take advantage of their position. The embittered Huang said that Zhang's eyes betrayed his insignificance. The teenager was perplexed, and he began to say that only she could organize the work so that others would not mistake him for her personal sugar boy. Then she ordered him to sort out this pile of folders and make a report for her. After all, Li saw with what eyes he looked at Don, and decided to teach him a lesson. The table was literally littered with folders. At the end of the meeting, Fan decided to go out onto the roof of the building to enjoy the local scenery. Unexpectedly, she called for her faithful assistant and friend to come out of the shadow, which turned out to be Master Du. He began to write out compliments to Mrs. Dong. The guy asked her to watch Zhang, since the others had already been found and turned out to be extremely cunning. Meanwhile, it was already late evening, and the main character was still at work. He didn't even notice how it was already 10 o'clock in the evening, and he stayed in the office as never before. Bai went to the window and, looking at the night city, thought, before he could not even think that he would focus on awakening the ring. And what was happening lately was more like a dream than reality. The young master looked at the time on his phone and realized that in a couple of hours the spirit of the ring would finally awaken. At that moment, a female voice called out to him. You noticed that she did not expect to meet him at the workplace at such a time. She added that it was quite strange, because he did not leave with Wan, and asked if he was really waiting for someone. Zhang replied that Li had to go out on business and so she left first. Bai himself did not understand why Tang was so angry today. Suddenly Fan approached the young man and stroked his face. But the guy dodged. You asked why he was dodging. Was she really not too beautiful for him? The teenager began to hesitantly deny and say that this was not the case at all. Dawn, in turn, continued to use her feminine tricks. Zhang knew that she liked to play with people, but I didn't think that she would start seducing him and starting this circus in the office. Suddenly, the light came on in the room, which they did not expect at such a moment. Their frightened eyes began to look for whoever remained at work so late. However, it was not a company employee, but an unexpected guest from the police. Xiao walked further through the office and met Bai's gaze. The guy was shocked by her sudden appearance and couldn't understand why she came here. You didn't even know who it was. Nan, in turn, behaved quite suspiciously and silently walked towards them. But what the main character saw next shocked him even more. A black aura wafted from the police officer. It was difficult to believe that a demonic entity lived in this little girl. When Xiao came even closer, she turned into a monster and attacked them with a long tongue. Zhang was shocked that the girl had literally merged with Qi Yu's race, after which he saved the headmistress and pushed her aside, so the monster's powerful tongue hit the window. Dawn was scared to death and did not understand what was happening, pretending to be a defenseless woman. Bai grabbed her hand and urged her to run away immediately, but Fan said that he had better come up with a way to kill this demon, adding that in a couple of hours he would definitely deal with her. You suddenly noticed that he would be able to use his ring spirit. The stunned young man asked her again. He could not even think that she was aware of evil spirits and the awakening of the ring. At this moment, Qiyu suddenly broke through the ceiling and blocked their path. Then she again hurried to attack them with her long tongue. Zhang again pushed Dong away, and he himself tried to jump to the side. However, the tongue still hit him in the hand and caused extremely painful and serious damage. Bai realized that Fan was aware of the magical ring and its abilities and urged her to run away, since he was the main target of the monster. He himself began to lead the ferocious monster along with him, and at the same time provoked him in every possible way. After all, he understood perfectly well that his current body was much stronger than before. Yu was surprised that such noble people still existed, because usually everyone only cares about their own skin. After some time of leading the demon by the nose through the long corridors of the office, he finally overtook the teenager. Qi literally nailed the wounded Zhang to the wall with his tongue, who had only 5 minutes left before the ring awakened. After which his body will be able to heal all the injuries and it will be possible to use magical abilities. However, at a certain moment the monster stopped attacking him. The guy was surprised. After a couple of seconds, he clearly heard the demon crying. Nan momentarily acquired a human form and looked at him with tears in her eyes. The main character again hoped that Xiao had finally woken up, which is what he asked her about. The girl turned into Yu again and said that she followed him around, and he was with another woman, adding that she did not deserve such treatment. Zhang, in turn, did not understand what she was talking about. Then the embittered monster began to kill the young master. There was only 1 minute left until 12 at night, but the ruthless demon seemed to leave him no chance of salvation. At that moment, Dawn suddenly appeared and threw a chair at the bloodthirsty monster. Qi, in turn, switched to the frightened girl, who suddenly realized that this could end badly. The monster grabbed her with its powerful tongue, and Fan could not escape. After which he threw her out the window. Bai only heard the wild scream of Yu falling down. The stunned protagonist still plucked up courage and decided to help her, because she gave her life to save him. The young master jumped out the window after her without a second thought, realizing what this could lead to. During the free fall, the teenager suddenly saw on the building clock that it was already midnight. In this connection, he ordered the spirit of the ring to appear immediately. The ring began to shine, and soon golden magical streams of energy enveloped their bodies. Zhang thought that it was all over. However, nothing happened, time did not turn back, and they continued to fall down. Perplexed and already seriously frightened, Bai wondered what could have gone wrong. A moment later, the spirit of the ring appeared before its owner in the form of a certain fairy, who greeted the master. The ghost explained that after awakening, his skills became more effective. Her appearance has also changed, and her ability to return can now return to a certain point. Moreover, this skill now stops time, but only for a few seconds. The young master could understand little at such a crucial moment and asked the spirit again. The fairy urged him to concentrate on what was happening, because the time freeze was almost over. The young man took Fan in his arms and prepared to land, hoping for a favorable outcome. And a moment later they landed quite successfully on the ground. Zhang sighed with relief. After which Dawn began to scold her, saying that she should not have risked her life for him. Yu said that she had never met someone like him before, because the boy was not completely different. At this time, Qi landed next to them. Bai realized that not everything was over yet. The monster once again released its long and lightning-fast tongue at them. The main character ordered Fan to immediately run away while he dealt with the monster, but the girl refused to leave him in trouble. Seeing that the demon's main weapon was already halfway there, Zhang used his return ability. Qi Yu's tongue suddenly stopped in place, held by a renewed spirit. The magical fairy called on the gentleman to act, noting that this skill had a short cooldown period. But Bai could not do this to the transformed Nan. He thought for a while. The pet called him to an immediate attack, and it was also necessary to first smear his hand with blood. The teenager asked if there was another way to defeat the monster, because initially it was a person close to him. The evil spirit strongly recommended killing this monster, and in the future when he deals with Qi, they should not be pitted. But the young master stood his ground and repeated that he could not kill his comrade, even if he was absorbed by Yu. The ghost revealed that they do not have a physical body and only rely on emotional people to manipulate them, adding that this is the only sure way to deal with such monsters. However, the main character had one obsessive thought, and he hastened to implement it. The guy instantly ran up to Fan and said that she owed him something to help him. Yu asked what he was talking about. Unexpectedly, Zhang kissed Dong. The girl was shocked by this turn of events. Qi literally went berserk, and Nan said through the demon that she hated him. Tears appeared in her eyes. Bai realized that his plan had worked after all. Since the monster's shell began to reject Zhao's body, which the young man took advantage of, the young master began to pull the girl out of the skin of the extremely annoying monster. A moment later, he finally managed to rescue the exhausted Nan from the clutches of the monster. Zhang asked the spirit why she was unconscious. The pet assured that she was fine. Turning around, Bai noticed the slimy Qiyu, who turned out to be still alive. Concerned, his faithful friend hurried his master to finish what he started. The teenager at the same moment bit his finger and sprinkled the demonic essence. And after a couple of seconds, the master's blood, like acid, began to corrode the monster. The young man asked the ghost if it could be that everyone he met was under the influence of you. The evil spirit replied that it was, and besides, it was just a low level of qi, which is called Wu Liang. The pet said that they are different. The bandit with the scar was Li Wan, that is, energetic, and the guy in Hui Jin prison, fiery. Zhang suddenly realized that all the monsters he had encountered before were considered weak qi. Spirit added that all high-level yes are currently sealed, but they are capable of taking on absolutely any form of different people, which was disappointing news. Concerned, Zhang wondered if they could ever awaken. However, at this time Xiao began to suddenly wake up. Bai immediately took her in his arms. Nan said that she had a dream in which she turned into a monster and wanted to kill him. The guy played along with her and replied that it was just a dream and she had nothing to worry about, then asked how she ended up here. The girl said that she was passing by and decided to just stop by at his work. Dawn naturally watched what was happening. She understood that he was not that strong yet, but the young man was truly special. Then she slowly ran her finger over her lips and said that she remembered it. At this time, there were demonic masters in Dong Xing's company on the top floor. One of them noticed that Wu Liang had been dealt with and suggested that the gentleman personally solve this problem. But the demon calmed him down and said that this was not necessary, especially since they needed to collect all the rings in order to awaken. Meanwhile, the main character quietly made his way into the house, because he understood that Li was already sleeping and it was better not to disturb her. The spirit began to make fun of the owner, saying that he had great potential, because he used magical power to get home. Zhang urged her to shut up, at which point he slipped and fell onto the balcony. The pet laughed even more. Bai said that it was better for her not to catch his eye. Suddenly the light came on in the room. The young master asked who was there. A nervous one came to him and said that the work she had assigned could not take so much time and asked where he had been. The young man began to mutter indistinctly, after which he still said that he had gone to kill people. Understanding that her reaction could now be completely unpredictable, which he completely guessed right. Since Tan began to shout that she didn't care where he was and even if they killed him, nothing bad would happen, after which she closed the door. Zhang listened to Li's grievances once again and wondered if she remembered that night. The most interesting thing is that after leaving Bai's room, the girl actually remembered that period of time. She couldn't bear his betrayal, and after a few minutes, the young master went to bed, thinking about her. Then he continued the dialogue with the spirit and asked whether her ability was at the maximum level. The ghost replied that of all the rings, only she has 5 stages of awakening. And at the moment she is at the first stage. The guy noticed that even at this level she has impressive abilities, adding that the rest have only 3 stages, and although it looks impressive from the outside, it is actually quite troublesome. Zhang began to praise her in every possible way and say that there is no one else like her and she should definitely develop. After which he asked how many magic rings there were. The pet replied that there were 5. Bai wanted to know why they appeared in the human world in the first place, because obviously not to help them discover aspects. The ghost said that this is a secret between all spirits and she cannot lift this veil for him. Since this is a rule and cannot be broken, the perplexed guy asked her what rules she was talking about. The fairy replied that if he was so interested in this question, then he could find the owner of the first ring. The young man continued to ask questions and asked who he was. The spirit said that they had already met. This is the guy who helped him. The main character was extremely surprised when he learned that in fact the answer was under his nose all along. At that moment, someone threw a crumpled piece of paper at his window. Zhang could not understand what was happening. Bai got out of bed and picked up the piece of paper, unfolded it, then read that the master wanted to meet with him. The guy saw outside the window the same man who helped him several times. The teenager immediately got ready and went out to meet the stranger. Approaching the master, the young man asked him if he was the original owner of the ring. Du decided to get straight to the point and said that he could enlighten him in the field of spiritual rings in exchange for help. Zhang agreed and encouraged him to tell him more about the magic rings. The master stated that the rings and the Qi race are connected, and if at least one of the 5 rings awakens, then the power of you will become a reality. The main character was stunned by this news and asked how, in this case, he could be useful to him. Du asked him to return the ring to him, because it had already been awakened by someone, and the demon was preparing to attack people. Bai decided to find out from the master whether there were others like them and who this monster was. The guy replied that he was similar to them, but he thought completely differently, and at the same time he belonged to the future generation of Xian Yuan. The teenager asked if Du was afraid that after everything he had said, he would not help him, much less return the ring. The young man said that everything depends on him, but the attack is aimed at Wan. Shocked Zhang could not understand why she was here and why they wanted to attack her, after which he asked what he should do. The master replied that he needed to keep an eye on suspicious people and wait in the lobby in 3 days until you fell into a trap. At this moment, a bus suddenly passed between them. Bai stepped aside. But when he passed, the guy was no longer there. The young man never had time to talk to him. The spirit noticed that the owner was under great pressure, but the teenager only thought that Tan was in danger. After the time had passed, the main character waited for the same villain to appear and constantly looked around. Li got nervous and asked why he followed her around all day. Zhang didn't know how to explain to her. At this time, the new head of the company, Fan, appeared and said that Huang was not interested in him, unlike her. Tan was infuriated by this and she snapped at Bai, then grabbed his hand and dragged him along, saying that he had a lot of work to do. Then she led him into the office, where there was a huge number of folders on the table, and said that he needed to look at them all, and she had a meeting. The next day, meeting Huang at work, the young master greeted her, but she did not reciprocate. At this moment, the worried spirit fairy reported that another ring bearer had entered the building. The main character instantly ran out into the hall, where there was a crowd of people, and began to look for the demon in the crowd. The ghost noticed that he would not allow himself to be revealed so easily, and would naturally disguise himself. Zhang noticed a suspicious stranger who entered the elevator with Li. The unknown person asked his pet if this girl was the target, because she had traces of the concentrated essence of the spirit on her body. The ghost responded positively, after which the demon began to act. A couple of seconds later, Tan's scream was heard from the elevator. People, in turn, did not attach any importance and went about their important business. Bai was well aware that Huang urgently needed help. Approaching the elevator, where there were perplexed people who did not understand why the elevator suddenly stopped. Li's screams only intensified. Everyone began to say that they needed to call the police, and besides, Tang was stuck in the elevator. Zhang could not wait and instantly broke the doors to the mine in order to save the girl. Looking down the shaft, the guy assumed that his awakened body should be able to withstand falls from such a height. Those around him began to dissuade him from this stupid idea, but the young man still jumped down. Having landed, the main character felt incredible pain throughout his body, and especially in his legs. The ghostly pet hurried to inform Bai that they were right below them. The young master hurried to open the hatch to the elevator and called out to Huang, which an unknown person tried to strangle. The guy literally went berserk. In connection with this, with a lightning-fast movement he struck the monster, as a result of which the demon flew to the other end of the cabin. Then he inquired about Tan's condition. The girl asked in a choked voice how he found out and why he came. However, at that moment the guy got to his feet and already intended to attack him. Subsequently, they simultaneously struck each other and retreated back. Zhang never expected the monster to be so fast and strong. Bai urged Huang to stay behind him while he dealt with this insolent person. The guy, in turn, was confident that he would defeat the teenager and took a stance. After which he dealt a strong blow to the young master. He ended up flying out of the elevator shaft. The demonic fighter himself followed him, actively using his abilities. The main character managed to grab the cable and noticed that this guy was quite strong. The spirit stated that he had trained his body, and the purple aura indicated that he had a ring. Zhang was distracted for a second and did not notice how the demon got close to him. The pet called on the master to be on the alert. Ultimately, Bai still missed an extremely painful blow from the guy. However, a moment later, the young master disappeared from sight of the monster, who began to look around in search of his victim. The young man, meanwhile, was already behind him, as he used the return skill to heal his wounds. After which they, like tigers in a cage, rushed to beat each other. At a certain moment they clashed with their fists. As a result, both masters flew off in different directions of the elevator shaft. Zhang asked him who he was and why he was attacking ordinary people. The guy assumed that he simply wanted to talk to him in order to confuse him. Bai became nervous and repeated her question. The spirit wanted to say something, but the stranger interrupted her, having said that he is also the owner of the ring, and if the teenager lets him kill Wan, they will separate like ships at sea. However, the young master could not allow this, which he hastened to inform the villain about. The ghost nevertheless said that the owner of this person most likely has a special ring. The demonic fighter himself declared that he had nothing more to talk about with him and hastened to attack him. The main character shouted loudly and furiously that he would not allow anyone to harm his girlfriend. Tang, in turn, was simply happy to hear such a statement from Zhang, but a second later her lover landed rather painfully in the elevator cabin. The evil spirit noticed that the owner could not cope with him, because this guy was initially trained, but Bai was not going to give up, at which time A worriedly asked if he was okay. Naturally, the young man could not fall on his face in front of her and replied that everything was fine with him. He abruptly stood up and smiled. Meanwhile, the enraged fighter jumped on top of him to deliver another blow. However, this time the teenager managed to react and ended up grabbing his leg. The demonic master himself did not expect the guy to be so dexterous, after which Zhang hit him against the wall with all his strength, and subsequently made a hole in it. The ghost noticed that if a person is close to the girl he likes, his strength increases. Bai said rather matter-of-factly that Tan no longer had to worry about this impudent guy. Li was impressed and couldn't understand when he became so strong and confident. The main character hurried to crawl through the hole and urged the stranger to continue the fight. At that moment, Master Du suddenly appeared, put the muzzle of a gun to the guy's head and said that he was just a puppet, adding that the owner of the palace can manipulate people like him, but prefers to do this with others. The wounded demon, in turn, asked what he intended to do now. The young man pulled the trigger and shot him in the arm, from which a purple aura began to emerge. Spirit Zhang suggested that he was indeed under the control of the palace master. Du stated that if he really wanted to catch him, then he needed to come to the roof of the Dunlu building in a couple of days. Bai was well aware of the importance, because first of all it concerns Huang's safety. The master called on him to fulfill his promise and then he would give him this man. The guy replied that in order to protect Tan, he was ready to do anything and even cooperate with him. 2 days later they met at the indicated place. The young master asked if he would definitely come. Bound and with his mouth covered, the demon tried to say something. The young man promised to free him when the owner came. Unexpectedly, Du said that he was not sure that this man's patron would appear soon, adding that the palace ring is capable of subjugating people, which means it has already awakened. The young master did not understand what this had to do with the matter, because his ring had also awakened. The young man replied that if he takes control of a huge number of people, the task will become more difficult. Spirit Zhang said that this ring has its drawbacks and the master should not worry about this. Just like she has disadvantages, for example, she consumes too much energy from the owner. Suddenly the fairy announced that another ring was very close. Du also noticed that he had come after all. They stared at the open door to the roof and waited for the demonic patron. However, a moment later, a young girl appeared in front of them and said that she had arrived. Extremely surprised, Bai asked if this high school student was the owner of the palace ring. The girl corrected him and stated that she was a second-year student, after which she asked him to let her leave with this guy, who, in turn, began nervously trying to tell her something. Du suddenly pointed a gun at her and ordered him to show his spirit to make sure it was really her. The girl closed her eyes and mentally summoned her ghost fairy, but she was different from Zhang's pet. The ghost greeted everyone present and noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. The main character asked his friend why she was so different from her. The indignant fairy said that next time she would definitely try on such an image for herself. The master noticed that after awakening, it would be difficult to deal with the palace ring. The girl again asked to be released with her demonic traveler, but Du said that she should not forget the reason why he was in their hands. Bai asked her why and why she began to kill ordinary people after she became the owner of the ring. The young lady replied that he had misunderstood and that she did not actually attack people. And Wan is her older sister. Everyone was shocked by this news. Zhang asked her why she tried to kill her sister then, suggesting that she was crazy. The girl immediately became embittered and said that Tan was abnormal and was wrong from the beginning. At that moment, the Tide guy seemed to receive strength from his mistress and broke the rope. Freed, he jumped to his feet, his eyes glowing purple. Du held the girl at gunpoint and urged her to calm down, saying that otherwise he would shoot. Suddenly, her demonic ally rushed across the roof like a lightning whirlwind. Then he found himself right in front of the master and grabbed the barrel of the gun. The guy ordered him to let go of the weapon, or he would pull the trigger, but the young man twisted the barrel in the opposite direction. The dumbfounded Du noticed that the awakened palace ring was too strong. The main character couldn't just stand by and instantly use the return skill. Golden symbols swirled around the master, but never hit the enemy. The spirit hastened to say that he should be more precise next time. Meanwhile, the guy grabbed the owner of the palace ring and ran away. Bai urged him not to run away and sent his magic at him, but the demon did not listen to him. The return ability again failed to catch the target, and they jumped from the roof of the building. Zhang then attempted to repair the extremely upset Du's gun, who noticed that there would be many more problems with the palace ring than he expected. But the teenager was interested in something else. He asked him what happened between Li and the owner of the ring. The master stated that this did not bother him at all and that only personal gain was important to him. And even today he called the young man for help, just for the sake of a profitable exchange, but everything did not go according to plan. Bai did not like his intentions, because usually selfish people did not do anything good. Du also advised the young master to stay away from Huang, since she was clearly not for him. The indignant protagonist did not understand why he was saying this and asked what he meant. The guy looked at Zhang menacingly and confidently said that she was his woman. The teenager replied that it was up to Li to decide who she liked and who she would never be with. Du realized that the kid didn't know anything and decided to enlighten him on this topic. The Tang family occupies half of Chinese enterprises and only his group can compare with it, so he is the one worthy of it. With his words, the master literally immersed Bai into the thought process. Du noticed that he has neither status nor business. Besides, he works for her, and initially he needs to think about how to live. And only with a good material component can you try to win such a girl. Then the master left. The saddened Zhang realized that in fact he was right, because he had nothing to love Li. The concerned spiritual fairy asked the gentleman if everything was okay with him. The young man shared his reasoning with her and concluded that he was really no one and not worthy of Tang. But most importantly, he sincerely wanted to live up to the status of his beloved. At that moment, Fan suddenly appeared. The girl smiled sweetly and said that he had begun to think correctly. The perplexed Bai asked Dawn when she managed to come here. You said that after they overcame death together, they became friends, adding that she has something that she can't handle on her own, and she needs his help. There is a certain product that is worth $1 billion and she will give him 10% as motivation. At this time, Huang entered Zhang's office, but did not find him at his desk. Bai, in turn, went with Fan to an incomprehensible and extremely suspicious place. The guy asked where they were, suggesting that this warehouse did not belong to the possessions of the Dongxing company. Dawn silently walked up to one of them and pressed the button. The roller shutter began to slowly rise. You stated that this is a corporate warehouse and she does not actually report to the corporation. The young man knew about this from Li's words. He became interested in what was inside, since they installed a biometric door. Dong decided to confess that she was working for Gu Chunyu. Zhang was shocked by her confession. Fan urged him not to react like that, because double agents are nothing new these days. After which you turned on the light in the room and said that she would show him a unique product. Inside there were two strange figurines. The main character did not understand what they were. In connection with this, I asked her what it was, and the girl smiled. Then she answered that this is an antique sapphire lamp and it dates back to the Western Zhou period. Its cost is $2 billion. Bai was naturally impressed by this amount and asked why there were only two. Dawn said that one foreign agent does not want to pay that kind of money and is trying to put pressure on them, but she does not know what to do. The young master realized that she had tampered with the lamp, and if this was discovered, then with the help of the Shi family, they were still doomed to failure. Fan stated that this is why she found the owner of the imperial ring. The girl abruptly approached the teenager and began to smile. Zhang realized that she wanted him to use his abilities and age the lamp, and then pass it off as real. You noticed that the boy really turned out to be very smart, and for all the work he would receive 100 million. Naturally, Bai did not want to do this and overstep his principles. Dawn said that he cannot deviate from his moral values, but at the same time he is ready to give their artifact to the foreigner. The young master replied that that was not the case at all and that he was simply talking to his spirit, adding that in such a situation, when he has no money, sometimes it is possible to deviate from the principles. Moreover, the amount is really quite decent. Zhang immediately began work. Meanwhile, Huang was having bad thoughts, because Fan had not been seen in the office all day, and Bai had also disappeared somewhere. It suddenly dawned on her that they had disappeared from the company at about the same time. Tan has already started to overthink herself and gets even angrier, thinking that her suspicions might be true. And then she clearly would not be able to restrain herself. The girl could not calm down. Meanwhile, it was late at night, and Li tried in vain to call the young man, but his phone was turned off, and therefore the girl literally lost her head. Huang continued to wander alone around the city at night and call Zhang. Suddenly an unfamiliar male voice called out to her. The guy asked her for her number. Tan answered the young man in an extremely rude manner so that he would not pester her. Suddenly, an unknown person grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. Li was scared. The young man grinned and said that things wouldn't work out that way and she wouldn't go anywhere. Wan told him to take his hands off, otherwise she would call the police. Besides, her boyfriend was already on the way. At that moment, his face was covered with some kind of scales, and his eyes lit up with magical light. The girl was terribly scared and stammered and asked what kind of monster he was. The monster said that she shouldn't know about it and reached out to her with a mutated hand. A loud scream rang out throughout the entire area, but the city continued to sleep peacefully and naturally no one saw or heard anything. As it turned out, at that time Zhang was not far from the scene of the incident, where Fan gave him money in advance. The cry of his beloved reached him. Bai instantly recognized her voice and said that it was Tang. Without taking the card, the main character ran to the aid of his unique Li. The spiritual fairy noticed that if she awakens a second time, the master will be less tired from running. The angry Dawn understood that Wan's charisma was truly enormous, since no one could resist her. The girl was sitting on the sidewalk and fearfully opened her eyes and saw an unknown person in front of her, who unexpectedly stood up for her and began to fight the ugly monster. At that moment, the mistress of the palace ring also appeared. The girl said that only she had the right to touch Tang, after which her body was overcome by the purple magic of the ring, which gave strength to her ally. At the same moment, the young man dealt a powerful blow to the demon, as a result of which he flew to the side. Li didn't understand what was happening, because this man wanted to kill her a couple of days ago, and now he was protecting her. Lu Qi also appeared out of nowhere. Lin, in turn, ordered her servant to kill the monster. However, a self-confident unknown demon declared that his poor guy would be the first to die. At a certain moment, they clashed blows. Their magical powers were at their limit. Wan decided to clarify and asked the young lady if she was really Lu. Qi answered dissatisfiedly that it was apparently very difficult for her to remember her name. Tan asked what happened to her, because she looked completely different, and offered her help if anything happened. Lin remained silent, after which she confidently stated that everything was absolutely not as it seemed to her. Lu reminded Huang how one day she disappeared without saying a word and so they had nothing more to talk about. Perplexed, Li asked if she was really talking about how she dropped out of school back then. The girl ignored her and urged Li Qi to quickly finish with this garbage. However, the wounded guy could not cope with the monstrously strong mutant. The self-confident demon declared that the palace ring was nothing compared to his power. Then he instantly rushed to beat her servant, delivering extremely painful blows. The girls watched in horror what was happening and could not do anything. After the monster finished with Li Qi, he headed towards the girls and declared that he would now deal with them. Lin immediately used control with her palace ring, but it didn't work. The mutant noticed that the previous owner of this ring was much stronger than her, and still smiling, he immediately rushed to the attack, believing that everything would end quickly. Scared to death, Lu understood that this was the end and she would die irreversibly. but the main character came to the rescue in a timely manner and stopped the demon using his abilities. Then he instantly ran up to Wan and asked if everything was okay with her. Tan replied that she was fine and suddenly pushed him away from her. Zhang asked for forgiveness and said that he simply panicked and was worried about her. After which she noticed that the mistress of the palace ring was standing next to her. She began to mutter indistinctly about something. By asked Li what she was talking about, Huang said that she herself did not understand anything. At that moment, the spirit of the ring informed the master that the demon's control was losing control, and the guy turned around sharply. The monster said that he had been waiting for the owner of the imperial ring to appear for a very long time. The young master asked the ghostly fairy if she knew him. The pet replied that she had never met this person before. The villain stated that he sent Wu Liang, who was in Nan's body, to kill him. The main character immediately changed his face and angrily said that he was finished. The demon strongly doubted this and hurried to attack Zhang, declaring that he would not do anything to him. From the impact, Bai rolled rather painfully along the ground and flew onto the roadway, receiving significant damage. The guy understood that if it weren't for the awakened ring that strengthened his body, he would have died. The spirit hastened to report about the truck that was heading towards him. The demon also hurried to take the chance and kill the young master. Wan, in turn, was terribly scared for the young man, realizing how this could end. At that moment, Lin decided to help him and used the palace ring. As a result, the truck ended up under a magical purple dome. The driver turned the steering wheel sharply towards the self-confident monster, and the truck almost overturned. But he was still able to stay on the wheels and headed straight into the monster. Subsequently, he carried the self-confident mutant straight into the warehouse. Concerned, Ten asked her beloved if everything was okay with him. Zhang could not understand why the mistress of the palace ring suddenly decided to help him. Meanwhile, a rather tenacious demon appeared again and declared that he had underestimated them. Bai was surprised that he did not die from being hit by the truck, especially at such a speed. This demon was clearly different from the others. The spiritual fairy said that he is at the level of Jia Wan, and although he has a human body, his power is significantly superior to ordinary masters. The angry guy said, considering that they have united against him, he intends to call someone. The master smiled sarcastically, then took out his lighter and, striking the flint, lit the fire, which turned into a fiery cloud and flew high above the monster's head. They could not understand what he was doing. A moment later an unknown person came out of the fire. The demon warned his minion to be careful as two of them had spirit rings. The fiery mutant looked at everyone with his indifferent gaze and said that they could not live. Lu stated that she was taking charge of one, but she could not help him. Zhang asked her to look after Huang. He himself rushed into battle with the fire master, believing that the awakened ring had given him enough strength. Having engaged in a brutal duel, the demon noticed that the guy preferred boxing, after which he used his fiery abilities, and thereby was able to burn Bai's hand. The main character called on the spiritual fairy to monitor him and activate regeneration at the right moments. Then he again launched a series of blows at an extremely strong opponent, as a result of which there was literally an explosion. The young master retreated back. The ghostly assistant instantly regenerated the master's body. The fire demon realized that he would not be so easy to deal with at the moment. After all, his ring awakened and reached its peak, and therefore began to use other skills. After a couple of seconds, the monster's body ignited and acquired fiery armor. Zhang immediately bit his finger and smeared his hand with blood, asking the spirit not to regenerate his body. After which he again bravely rushed into another attack. The monster also ran towards him, and at the most crucial moment I used the ability to return. Thus, he managed to deliver a bloody blow to the master and at the same time was behind so that he could not harm him. The demon, in turn, realized that he still lost in this battle. His body was literally corroded by the blood of the main character. The guy began to scream in wild pain. Bai was surprised by the power of his own blood. He did not expect that it would simply melt the monster. The evil spirit noticed that this was the only time the owner actually used his head and outsmarted his opponent. Zhang, in turn, began to boast in every possible way, saying that he was far from a fool. Meanwhile, a fiery pearl fell from the body of the defeated master. The teenager said that the same particle fell from the monster, and at that time a woman's scream was heard, but not from Li. Bai turned around and saw the demon trying to strangle Lin. he declared that she would not be able to control him. The main character instantly urged him to leave the girl alone and find a more suitable opponent. However, a second later, a metal pipe pierced him, which pierced his body. As a result, Zhang flew into the wall, which seemed to be the end of it all. The young master began to choke on his own blood and could not do anything. Tan and the ghostly fairy were shocked by this outcome and could not believe what was happening. The monster angrily said that he returned his brother's favor to this teenager. At that moment, the wounded Li Qi suddenly attacked him, but he failed to inflict proper damage. He demanded that the guy let Lu go, who called on her minion to run away immediately. The demonic master easily threw the young man aside and declared that his time would soon come. The mutilated guy could not bear such a blow and gradually closed his eyes. Wan, in turn, tried to somehow harm him and threw a shoe at his head, ordering him to immediately release Lu Qi, which was clearly reckless on her part. The guy didn't pay any attention to her, but Tan threw the second shoe at him. The monster remained silent for some time, after which he still said that today was not their day, because they will inevitably die, and pressed his hand on her sister Lin's neck. Then he threw it aside to Li and said that they would watch each other die. Qi literally flew into Huang and thereby knocked her off her feet, causing them to fall to the ground. After which, absolutely calmly, he made a hole in the frightened Tang with his hand. And he hurried to kill her sister Lin. The picture was truly terrifying. However, this seemed not enough to the distraught monster, and he decided to finish them off. At this time, Li, with the last of her strength, told Qi that in fact she did not run away then, but simply wanted to realize her dreams. The girl answered in a choked voice that she understood her. The demonic master, in turn, began to finish the job. However, the main character, who arrived in time, prevented him from doing this. The guy grabbed his hand. After which he said that he was not dead yet and would not allow his woman to be treated this way. The dying Wan was touched by his words, realizing that he was her destiny. The self-confident demon said that the teenager would not be able to defeat him in any case, and he would soon die. But Zhang continued to hold his hand and said that he would not allow him to move, which the master naturally doubted, but after a couple of seconds he felt the petrification of his hand, which he could not move. Bai ordered his spiritual friend to use the return on everyone while he dealt with this mutant, after which he immediately dealt a crushing blow to the perplexed monster. The demon, in turn, assumed that this was not his strength, because in fact he was weak. The young man hurried with attacks towards the monster that flew to the side. He concentrated all the magical power in his hand to deliver the most powerful blow. However, the demon master didn't even feel it and just laughed, stating that the boy was too weak and would not be able to harm him, which he was very wrong about, because Zhang instantly summoned the spirit of the ring to the second awakening. Then he hurried with the next attack, which was much more noticeable. A golden spot suddenly appeared in the area of the mutant's heart. The guy got nervous and asked what it was. A moment later, the magical essence concentrated on the head of the perplexed demon. He asked in fear what he was up to. Bai replied, "Nothing special." He simply aged his body by 1,000 years, at which point the monster was torn into pieces. The main character suddenly felt weak in his legs and began to cough up blood, after which he completely collapsed to the ground, because he used an excessively huge amount of energy with this skill. Wan didn't understand what was happening to him and ran up and asked if he was okay. The young spruce master, flushed with blood, squeezed out that everything was fine with him. The ghost fairy noticed that her owner was too careless and did not take care of himself. Lin really didn't like that her sister always got all the attention. Meanwhile, an unknown man appeared on the horizon, declaring that he was jealous, because there were two beauties next to this young man. Lu called for Tang to be behind them, and Zhang asked who he was and what he wanted. The guy smiled and said that he had better ask his spirit this question. The spiritual friend, in turn, was dumbfounded by his appearance and said that this could not happen. Bai understood that at the moment he could not use his abilities, since his body might not withstand it. The unknown demon said that he was not here for a showdown and urged the teenager to give him 2 girls in order to avoid death. Naturally, the main character refused such a dubious barter and noticed that Li's life was much more important than his. Wan was impressed to hear such a statement from her lover. The monster sighed heavily and said that he could only sympathize with them, because initially he did not want to show his body. At that moment, the stranger turned into a huge and ugly octopus. after which the self-confident demon laughed loudly and declared that they would not survive. Its long tentacles immediately rushed to grab them. Zhang called on everyone to run away. At this time, someone opened fire on him, literally starting to shoot the monster. However, this did little harm to him. The enraged monster began to look around. Hearing the shots, the young master assumed it was due and turned around. Tan, in turn, pressed herself close to Bai and felt safe. It seemed to her that he had become even stronger. Meanwhile, the master and a group of soldiers were already at the ready. The guy noticed that he had no abilities. The angry octopus declared that he would kill the main owner of the spiritual ring. Du again ordered the soldiers to open fire on the extremely confident demon. Several people immediately began to carry out the order and began shooting at the mutant, who just laughed and said that ordinary bullets wouldn't do anything to him. But after just a second, he noticed that his body began to literally melt. The master said that in fact these bullets were soaked in his blood and everything was not as rosy as he imagined. The embittered monster said that this time he was lucky, but the next meeting would be his last. After which it seemed to evaporate into thin air, leaving only black smoke in that place. Zhang thanked him for his help and said that one day he would repay him in kind. Du called Huang over and urged her to hurry up, because her sister had come to see her. The perplexed Li asked him if she really deigned to show up. At that moment, a black car drove up to them and stopped in front of Tang. Bai, in turn, noticed that it was quite difficult to drive such a car. A couple of minutes later, a young lady defiantly emerged from the car. The girl walked up to Huang in a businesslike manner and did not greet her very cordially. For some reason, the young master doubted that this was really elder sister Tang. But Li addressed her as a sister and asked why she had come so unexpectedly. The girl encouraged her to go back and get on with her life instead of playing in the past. However, Huang refused her and told her that she would never return, which only worsened the situation. Tan looked at her beloved Bai and said that he would protect her. The dissatisfied woman noticed that this uneducated boy wanted to confuse her sister. The main character, in turn, greeted the lady extremely politely. But the reaction of the insolent sister was rather inadequate, as she suddenly slapped the young man. Outraged, Li sternly declared that she had no right to beat him. The arrogant girl instantly ordered her bodyguards to take Tang away from here. The guards immediately dragged her into the car. Zhang did not remain silent and said that she should not do this. After all, she can't just stop them from communicating, but the woman ignored him. Suddenly, Bai felt bad and started coughing up blood again, then completely collapsed to the ground. The spiritual assistant urged him not to make sudden movements, as he needed to rest. But his body has reached its limit, and in order not to die now, he just needs to not strain his body for a while. After which the elder sister Huang rather pompously approached the young man and said that she was giving him 5 million. But on one condition, that he never approach her sister again. Then she threw him a check. The main character was shocked by such impudence and arrogance of this person. Meanwhile, a light rain began to fall, beating sadly on the puddles. The young master tried to get up, but his strength left him and he continued to get wet in the rain. Lin looked at him sadly. It seemed that she even sympathized with the guy. At a certain point, Zhang again coughed up blood, which was washed away with water. Having become agitated, the young man lost consciousness. The spiritual fairy was sincerely sorry for her master. Spirit Lu, on the contrary, urged her mistress to take the chance and kill Bai so that he would not come close to Tang again. The teenager's ghostly assistant stated that she was very strong now and would not allow him to be harmed. As a result, they got into an argument with Chi's friend, who suddenly headed towards the master. Seeing Lin walking towards the master, the spirit ordered her to stop and not make a mistake. However, the girl ignored her and approached Zhang. The fairy suddenly awakened and took on a human form. Then she again repeated her demand that she immediately move away from her owner. Pet Lu also increased in size and stated that she would die as she was forcibly awakened. The ghostly girl noticed that before that she would definitely repel them and protect the master. But Chi suddenly took Bai and put him on her back, saying that she would not harm him. At that moment, Fan suddenly showed up and called on everyone to go to her house, since they had nowhere to stay. After a long time, the extremely weak protagonist opened his eyes. The first person Zhang saw was Dong. The girl smiled sweetly at him. The guy instantly jumped up and asked where he was and why she was here. Then he looked under the sheet and found that she was without clothes, so he asked where his things were. A dissatisfied Yu noticed that this was an extremely stupid question, considering that he woke up in her bed. At that moment, Lin entered the room and called for him to get up, because they needed to discuss something. Perplexed, Bai asked what exactly she wanted to discuss. Lu stated that they need to figure out how to kill Li's older sister and rescue Huang herself. The young master remembered that his beloved was taken away by that arrogant woman. Zhang jumped up and the girls, in turn, instantly turned away. The surprised teenager did not understand what was happening, which he asked them about. Then it dawned on him, and he immediately covered himself with a sheet, while turning red as a tomato. A few minutes later they were sitting at the table and discussing where they could look for Tan and how to get her out of her sister's hands. Fan noted that Li had previously talked about how her parents forced her to move abroad. Bai remembered that they grew up together and asked if she knew where exactly her parents wanted to send her. But Dawn hastened to say that this is not what is important now, but something completely different. Namely the spirit of the ring. Everyone present perked up and asked what she meant. You said that the owner of the fourth ring became the official guest of Tang Group. Zhang asked the next question if she had seen the power of this very ring. Fan said that she didn't know this, but Chunyu told her that the palace lord's ring represents charm. Stunned, Bai asked what other abilities this ring might have. Dong said she doesn't know this, but she has the address to which the Tang company sends it to Li. The guy very convincingly asked her to tell her the address, and he would take care of the rest personally. You noted that she could give him the necessary information, but under one condition. If he agrees to spend time with her and have dinner together tonight. The young master was dumbfounded by this condition, and for the first few seconds he didn't even know how to react. Then he nevertheless said that this was impossible, and she should understand such things. Fan stroked the teenager's face and said that he actually wanted this himself. Lin and Li Qi hurried to leave, realizing that at this celebration of life they were clearly superfluous. Lu said she would call soon. The main character was against such a continuation of the banquet and asked them not to leave. The girl smiled sweetly and said that at the moment she did not want to disturb him, after which she closed the door on the back side, and they were left alone in the apartment. At this moment, the extremely assertive Yu asked him if he agreed with her condition, stating that if he behaves well, she will not only tell him everything, but will also help in this difficult matter. After all, she knows the secret path along which it will be easiest to free Wan. Zhang, in turn, immediately blushed and did not know how to finally get rid of her. Meanwhile, the self-confident girl began to act and lure the young man in every possible way. Bai was at a loss for a moment and began to think about how he could get out of this situation. Fan continued to press the main character and literally threw him onto the sofa. At that moment, the guy remembered his beloved Wan and seemed to fall into a stupor. After which he still plucked up courage and pushed Dawn away from him. He declared that he could not let Tan down. Zhang breathed a sigh of relief as he almost fell into her clutches. You asked if it was because she didn't look like Li. Bai said that this is not so at all and that is not the point at all. At this moment, the girl, who did not give up hope, again approached him and reached out to kiss him. The teenager once again pushed her away from him and looked pitifully into her eyes. However, Fan was not going to give up and asked him not to be so categorical towards her. After which she insisted on her own and kissed the young master. The young lady said that she had previously wanted to use it to defeat Tang, but now she realized differently. That she actually fell in love with the one who saved her life not so long ago. Zhang replied that in such a situation he would save any person and should not take it so seriously. Fan pressed herself against Bai again and noticed that it was she who ended up there and this was not an accident. Then she gave him a map with the necessary information and a secret route. Adding that she would eagerly await his return, she looked at the teenager with loving eyes. The young master stated that she knew about the abilities of his ring and therefore nothing would happen to him. Suddenly offended, Dawn turned away from him and asked him not to hesitate and to hurry to his Li. Partly he felt sorry for the girl, but by and large he was not interested in her. Fan said that she would not give up in any case, despite his reluctance to be with her. Adding that this time she would definitely defeat Huang, since it was within her control. The guy was surprised by her statement. 3 days later, Zhang and his new friends prepared to free Tang, which was led under numerous guards to the ship. Bai followed her through binoculars. After which he notified Lu and Li Qi that the girl was being taken to a ship and there were a lot of bodyguards there. Lin, like everyone else, dressed in diving equipment and called on the team to take immediate action. while big sister Huang assured Li that she was only doing this for her own good. The young lady said that she should understand her, and not keep her in a golden cage. The woman replied that she understood her perfectly, but could not allow her to get into trouble. However, Tang stood her ground and stated that she only wanted to leave with the young master. Meanwhile, spiritual fairy Lu Qi hovered over the Huang sisters and listened to what they were saying, having given a kind of command to the main character, who instantly began to act. Zhang immediately jumped out of the water and called out to his beloved, saying that he would definitely save her. The extremely indignant sister ordered her bodyguards to ensure Li's safety and not let the young man near her. But at this moment, the ghostly spirit Lu Qi used her abilities, and with the help of mind control, she subjugated the guards. As a result, they froze in place. The girl looked around and saw that all her subordinates seemed to have turned to stone. At that moment, the main character rushed to Wan and hugged her and said that he would not give her to anyone. The spiritual fairy noticed that she felt something big was approaching, and this was clearly not good. A moment later, huge tentacles of that same monster appeared from the water. Who knew that Bai would try to rescue his Tang, and thereby fall into his trap? After which the demonic octopus grabbed the guy with its tentacles and limited his movements. However, the young master promptly took advantage of the time rollback, but the demon also grabbed Li. Then he dragged her under the water. The teenager immediately rushed after her and tried to grab her hand. Thus, the two of them found themselves underwater, where the advantage was naturally on the side of the octopus. The enraged demon said that this time he would definitely kill the boy and Wan. Frightened Ten urged the young man to be careful. The teenager said that he had not come alone. Meanwhile, the bodyguards began shooting into the water, trying to hit the monster. The octopus himself could not understand why the bullets were again stuck in Xuanyang's blood. Li Qi in turn hurried Zhang and asked Li Qi to quickly raise them. At that moment, an unknown purple diamond appeared in front of him. The guy did not understand what was happening. This is what I asked the main character about, because the water literally rose from the sea and headed towards him. He suddenly realized that this was actually the fourth holder of the spirit ring. The monster smiled maliciously and noticed that the ring had finally awakened. The embittered sister Huang asked Li Qi where they went. The young master realized with horror that she was the owner of the main ring, which he said with surprise. At that moment, the ring on her finger glowed dark red, emitting magic. The woman, in turn, rather proudly said that she really was the owner of the ghostly ring, after which she immediately summoned her spiritual warrior. A moment later, a girl appeared with a katana at her advantage and greeted the hostess. The girl ordered her to use the curvature of space. The ghostly girl began to carry out the mistress's received order and took out her blade. As a result, they instantly disappeared from Li Qi's sight. The master was at a loss. After all, he could not even imagine what the main spiritual ring was capable of. Finding himself in a dark room, Zhang asked where he was. The fairy replied that the gentleman was in a secret room. The young master began to look around, but there was pitch darkness all around. Suddenly, someone opened the door to the room and a bright light shone on by. The guy asked who it was. Suddenly Sister Huang entered the room and said that he apparently did not see the difference between life and death. The teenager replied that he only wanted to protect Li, and besides, only she herself should manage her life. The woman said that Tang had been dependent on her relatives all her life, and if Zhang left her alone, she would let him live. However, if he catches her eye next time, he will say goodbye to his life. The guy pretended to be a scared boy and asked to be given the opportunity to leave. She didn't pay attention to how Bai's legs sparkled with the magic of the spiritual ring. The girl called him an ordinary cowardly teenager who was obliged not to get involved in this matter from the beginning. The young man noticed that maybe she was right and he was really afraid of death. But not this time, because she did not take into account one small but very important detail. A second later, the floor literally broke under the young master's feet, and he fell down. The stunned woman instantly rushed to catch up with him and was about to go down to the ground floor. However, the ghostly warrior urged her not to do this, since she had a dress and there was a restaurant downstairs. Elder Sister Li looked into the hole in the floor and said that sooner or later she would get to him. Meanwhile, the main character landed right on the table and turned everything upside down. The young lady managed to jump up. Zhang, in turn, only caught a plate and a few chocolates, after which he smiled sweetly at the girl and hurried to say goodbye to the girl. but one of the guests still recognized him and hurried to inform the guards. Bai understood perfectly well that he needed to act quickly, because he could be caught. Suddenly he heard the loud stomping of bodyguards and hid in one of the rooms. Looking around, he assumed that there was no one in the room. However, he was mistaken, because suddenly a female voice called out to him. The girl asked what he was doing in someone else's room. Zhang turned around and saw a young lady in front of him in a towel, who said that she had not had time to take a shower. Naturally, the stunned protagonist began to ask her for forgiveness, and he said that he would leave immediately, once again apologizing for the disturbance. But at that moment he heard the shudder of a pistol behind his back, which the girl put to his head. She knew very well that he was the same Bai, because older sister Li was looking for him. The young master fixed his menacing gaze on her and asked if she was a member of the Tang family. The lady answered positively and added that he would not be able to steal one. Then she noticed that the older sister ordered not to talk to him at all, but she decided to make an exception, at which time Zhang took advantage of the return of time, and finding himself right in front of her, only on the other side, he hastened to strike. As a result, a fight broke out between them. It is worth noting that the girl was quite knowledgeable in martial arts. The young lady asked if it was just the ability of his spirit ring. Bai didn't even have time to answer when she began to attack him again. The girl deliberately decided to distract the young man. Subsequently, she succeeded and the master, breaking the door, flew out of the room into the corridor. Where were the bodyguards, who immediately began to shoot at him? However, Zhang applied a time stop in an extremely timely manner and the bullets froze right in front of him. After which the teenager calmly ran away. A loud explosion suddenly occurred behind him.